10 foods that will never expire. Moldy bread, slimy cereal, furry strawberries. It's a broken record scenario playing out in fridges everywhere. No matter how many organizational systems or electronic monitors we employ, perishables inevitably expire and get tossed. But what if certain edibles could almost last forever without refrigeration or special handling? Turns out a handful of pantry staples and dry goods have nearly indefinite shelf lives when stored properly. We're talking about lasting for decades and decades without spoiling, rotting, or harboring bacteria. Pretty mind-blowing. But what makes these foods different? And why do they have such a long shelf life? Today, we'll take a look at 10 foods that will never expire. Before we get started, hit the like button, subscribe to this, and turn on the notification bell to get alerted anytime we post amazing videos like this. Alright, let's dive in. White rice. When it comes to edible staples that truly last forever, white rice has incredible staying power. White rice specifically has an exceptionally long shelf life that can be measured in decades when stored properly. How is white rice able to last for so many years without spoiling or going stale? It comes down to moisture content and lack of fat, two things microorganisms need to grow and multiply. Since white rice is highly processed to remove the husk, bran layers, and germ, what remains is the endosperm. This starchy central portion contains very little protein, fat, or moisture, making it an incredibly unfavorable environment for mold, bacteria, and other spoilage microbes to thrive. Rice weevils and other pantry pests also dislike making a home in super dry white rice. As long as the storage container is kept tightly sealed without excess air or moisture getting in, those rice grains should last pretty much forever. Cornstarch. Like white rice, cornstarch seriously lacks anything exciting that mold spores, bacteria, and other spoilage microorganisms can feast on to proliferate. With hardly any moisture content, plain cornstarch makes for an exceptionally unfavorable environment for most microbes to take up residence in. This white powdery derivative of corn kernels is pretty much pure starch, which happens to have almost indefinite shelf stability. As long as the container remains securely sealed to prevent moisture absorption, cornstarch can outlive most humans if stored in a consistently cool, dark, and dry location. We're talking about lasting for decades and decades here, possibly even over a century, long after its best buy date has passed. Dried fruits and vegetables. It turns out dehydration is a great way to preserve fruits, vegetables, beans, lentils, and more for exceptionally long shelf lives. By removing nearly all the moisture, microbial growth is prevented. With no water activity, spoilage, bacteria, mold, and yeast quite literally dry up and die off. Water activity measures free moisture available for microorganisms to metabolize. Most bacteria need a minimum water activity level of around 0.91 to multiply. Dehydrated foods typically measure way below that threshold, allowing them to stay fresh and safe for very prolonged storage. White sugar. When it comes to exceptionally long-lived pantry items, sugar is right up there with salt as being practically immortal if kept free of moisture and contaminants. The high concentration of sucrose and glucose act as a natural preservative by binding water molecules. This creates an almost toxin-like environment unable to support microbial growth and reproduction. So as long as that bag or tub of table sugar remains securely sealed and stored somewhere cool and moisture-free, it should feasibly last forever without actually expiring in the traditional sense. In fact, sugar was so prized historically as a preservative for fruit and berries that it became extremely valuable. Salt. Like sugar, salt is highly resistant to spoilage due to its low moisture content and mineral properties. As long as no containment or food particles get mixed in, plain table salt can sit around in storage indefinitely without ever truly expiring. This makes salt excellent for stockpiling as emergency rations. Salt preservation works because the sodium binds with water molecules, drastically slowing down spoilage. Some people even use salt to preserve meat because of its properties. However, meat eventually goes rancid thanks to its residual fat content that microbes can still feed on over time. Typical table salt contains anti-clumping agents, which can eventually expire after a few years. But pure natural forms like kosher or sea salt lack additives, allowing them to last more or less forever if kept sealed away in a moisture-free environment. Powdered milk. Thanks to the removal of almost all moisture content, powdered or dehydrated milk has a much longer shelf life compared to its liquid forms. Kept sealed in oxygen-free packaging and stored in ideal dark, dry, and cool conditions, powdered varieties can last up to 10 years while retaining their flavor. The milk powder itself doesn't necessarily spoil or expire for a good couple of decades or longer, but its overall quality and taste does gradually decline over time. Rancid flavors start developing around the 10-year mark as fats oxidize, but up till then you can expect a decent flavor and a solid amount of nutrients. One upside to long-term storage is lightweight portability when camping or backpacking. Powdered milk needs no refrigeration, yet offers similar nutrition and creaminess. Just toss some packets or tins in your rucksack and enjoy calcium and protein on the trail. Dry pasta. As a dried grain-based staple without much moisture or fat, pasta has some righteous shelf life expectancy and storage. Kept safe from pests in a sealed airtight container, somewhere cool and dry, uncooked spaghetti, penne, rotini, and other shapes can last upwards of 2 to 3 years past the stamped expiration date. The two major factors that affect the shelf life of pasta include ingredient quality and storage containers. Higher durum wheat semolina content usually survives longer than plain flour pasta. Plus, temperatures under 70 degrees Fahrenheit and avoiding humidity prevents bugs and mold growth. So if you stockpile your pasta incorrectly, then it'll expire faster than it should. But proper storage gives it a very long shelf life. Maple syrup. Thanks to its high sugar content, pure maple syrup can last almost indefinitely at room temperature. The moisture levels and acidity help prevent mold growth and bacterial spoilage over time. However, direct sunlight exposure can darken its color. But even after crystallization, maple syrup remains safe to consume for years ahead. Once opened, maple syrup lasts up to a year refrigerated before its flavor and quality drop off. So to prevent that, decant leftover syrup into small, reusable containers for access as needed, while saving the rest sealed, airtight away from air exposure. Whole grains. Thanks to their protective outer bran coating and internal germ filled with nutrients and healthy fats, whole food grains have remarkably enduring shelf life, spanning years or decades if stored properly. We're talking unprocessed wheat, rice, oats, quinoa, barley, rye, millet, all the staple grains, boasting their nutritious parts intact. Keeping safe from moisture, oxygen, light exposure, and bugs in an airtight container, you can expect whole grains to last for a decade or longer before they begin to degrade. The innate denseness keeps mold, bacteria, and other spoilers from proliferating quickly. For long-term food storage, experts advise stocking up on these dried whole grains because their high density supplies nourishing calories efficiently. Another advantage of whole grains is versatile preparation later on. From grinding wheat and quinoa into nutritious flour, to boiling up rice, barley, and oats for side dishes, soups, and porridges, you've got wholesome ingredients for survival cooking, regardless of what upcoming catastrophe, conflicts, or supply chain disruption threaten famine down the line. Honey. Often labeled the only food that never spoils, honey remains edible and antimicrobial for centuries or even millennia, thanks to inhibitory enzymes and low moisture content, creating a preservative effect. There are stories of ancient jars found in Egyptian tombs filled with honey that are thousands of years old, yet still edible and unspoiled. Provided moisture is kept away, honey essentially lasts forever without actually expiring in the traditional sense. Any visible crystallization over time poses zero risk and can be reliquefied gently with warm water if desired. Now mind you, some flavor and aroma fading occurs eventually as volatile compounds degrade and oxidation slowly happens. However, the predominant sugars and organic acids persist nearly indefinitely. Which of these foods have you ever tried storing? And for how long? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching!